We want to welcome you to Adoption Matters. We are a podcast with real people sharing real stories and getting real about adoption from all three perspectives of the adoption triad. Unfortunately, our lead co-host, Kim Noeth, cannot be with us today. She is a birth mom. We will certainly miss her contributions and her perspective today. But this is Sharon Butler-Obazee, who is an adoptee. She's part of our Growing Intentional Families Together coaching team. I'm Sally Ankerfelt, and an adoptive parent and also part of our team. So together with this podcast, our main goal is to be able to explore different topics, to share frank conversations about what we are considering, and it's driven by truth-telling and truth-seeking. And so we want to talk about important issues in adoption. And today we are so happy to and honored to have April Dinwoodie here with us. April is an advocate for adoption and foster care and multiracial families. She was relinquished into foster care at birth, adopted by the age of 2. She grew up navigating life as a Black, biracial woman in a predominantly white space. Her personal journey is shaped by questions of identity, belonging, and family. This has fueled her lifelong commitment to embracing empathy, inclusion, and understanding. April, I'm honored with knowing and appreciating your work over the years. I know that you host 2 podcasts, Born in June, Raised in April, What Adoption Can Teach the World, and also Calendar Conversations, a guide for adoptive parents that promotes dialogue about identity and family and cultural differences. And it's amazing that you're also a former chief executive of the Donaldson Adoption Institute, and you have led national adoption reform initiatives and founded Adoptment, a mentoring program for adopted and foster youth. And I'll put a little plug in there. Also, coaching. That's part of that program, I noticed, in terms of families, individuals. So you're very accessible through that program. And at us being coaches, it's cool to see that you also offer that. Currently, you are serving as Executive Director of Transracial Journeys, Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging, and you're the lead at that Stephen Madden Ltd. And with that, you facilitate adoption affinity support groups in schools, you consult on federal child welfare grants, and you serve on advisory boards within the adoption community. So when do you have time to breathe? It's amazing. And so over the last 25 years, you have really put yourself out there, done a lot of emotional work on behalf of society in general, and we appreciate all that you've been doing. So April, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Sally.
Yeah.
Thank you, Sharon. It's a joy to be here.
Yeah. So today we want to think about blind spots, exploring and uncovering what we missed. And April, kind of a big topic. Love to hear from you what you think about that and what you would like to offer.
Well, I think one of the things that I have to sort of start with is what we miss as a society broadly. And that is that everyone has a childhood, and that childhood informs so much of your present moment as an individual in the world, as a parent, as a caregiver, as a person who is navigating relationships, work, community. And I feel like there's a more of a push towards understanding that now. But for the better part of my life, it's been one of those things where there is willful ignorance or blindness around not remembering how excruciating growing up can be. I think that's the place where I'd like to start, because I feel like if we start there and we talk more broadly about this idea that there's so much healing and reflection on our childhoods that must be done as human beings. If we can start there, then we can talk about the added layers that adoption brings and the urgency and the specificity of that caregiver, parent, guide, how urgent it is for them to do their work so that they can help support the big work of identity formation, relationship building, love, that they're entrusted to do through adoption. So that's the broad, big thing I think that we have missed in a lot of ways. And it's certainly impacted me in my life, and I can get into that a little bit, when it comes to like where the blind spots have been for my parents. Yeah.
Oh, I'd love to hear about that, April. Where do you think the blind spots were for your parents?
Well, so we started with this idea of this universal reality of everyone has a childhood, everyone has an adolescence, everyone has a young adulthood. Everyone in some form or fashion is either symbolically or in real time connected to a family, right? And so I think for my parents specifically, I think there's this, I think they also would be kind of inserted into that silent generation where we didn't talk about such things. We didn't talk about certainly didn't talk about identity. We certainly didn't talk about anything that we didn't get as children, because everything we got was meant to be appreciated and we were meant to be grateful for it. And there was nothing about maybe a limitation of our parents that was meant to be named or discussed or anything. So I think where the blind spots occurred for my parents came later in their existence, and they largely came because what happened when they adopted me was they disrupted a very uninteresting existence, and that's not a judgment. It's more of there wasn't that much to see. They were high school sweethearts. They got married. They started having a family. It took a little while. That was part of their narrative, and they were parenting. And all of a sudden, now it was a good idea to adopt a child. Gender selection. They wanted 2 boys and 2 girls. They had 2 boys and a girl. They wanted 2 boys and 2 girls. And there was this idea that it would be this nice story, happy ending. They wanted to parent. They were good parents in their eyes, and thought that would be a good idea. So they completely missed the realities of adopting a child of another race. And they completely missed the realities of the loss and grief of adoption. So there was just no, there was nothing for them to tap into in that respect.
Yeah. Those are significant blind spots, aren't they? I mean, I
Significant.
think sometimes people think of blind spots and that are mostly applicable to the adoptee, not realizing that as parents, even parents as being a parent of biological children now, I see myself as having blind spots. I mean, basically there are things that you overlook inadvertently. You don't realize how important it was. And that's why I asked you about the blind spots your parents had, because, it's cyclical, isn't it? Your parents had blind spots. They raised you. You become a fantastic person. I don't know if you have children or not, but in my case, I have kids, and I wonder what my blind spots are for them as well. I think it's cyclical.
Yeah, we all have things that we miss. I mean, I always say every vigilant eye has blind spots, and I feel like my role in the world and closer in an adoption is to help make sense of some of those spaces and help draw attention and light to those places, very purposefully, because the light and the attention is going there anyway, with behaviors, with ways that I feel like myself as an adopted person was looking for attention, was trying to create the diversions to say, hey, this is a thing that's happening, but there was just no sense of what that was or what to do with it. So I feel like the ability to kind of name, again with specificity, some of the things that are needed in adoption are broader reaching than just adoption. It's like when you can handle it here, when you can name it and claim it and be very committed to looking after children at the highest level of engagement, which is what every child deserves, but it most certainly is true for trauma beginnings and abuse, neglect, then we have so much we can share with the world. That's why my podcast is What Adoption Can Teach the World, because so much has been illuminated for me, and it didn't completely, it's taken me down, but it didn't completely take me out. So if I can clear some of those cobwebs and pull the blinds back a little and make those blind spots a little bit more bright, then let's go.
Yeah. I think too, what you were saying is so spot on in terms of the white-bodied person's world that tells the white-bodied person that you have a right to, I can't remember the word you used for your parents, but I'm going to say the right to be comfortable. And so anything that disrupts that comfort then can be really like, wait a minute, this isn't what this was supposed to be. There's that. There's also the right we feel we have, or we've been told also, to enter into any space we want, and that anybody would want us there.
Yeah.
So why not, adopt a child of another race? Because heck, we would, so there's sort of that, and I'm not trying to be hard on the white-bodied person in the sense that it's the reality. It's how we have been groomed. But if we don't realize that, then we are harming people. We're harming young people coming into our space. If we cannot understand that we have just put ourselves in a different space, and that comfort will not be our space, and that's okay. That's what it's going to be. Meaning, it is a different world than the bubble in which we've been told we will be living. So there's that. I think that kind of groundbreaking work that needs to happen with white-bodied people who are entering into adoption in the first place, and then also are considering adopting somebody from a different culture or race, that really needs to take place. And otherwise there's this bewilderment. I think there's also experiences of, why isn't this child not appreciating, not complying, or not, whatever the not is, it becomes about what the child is not doing, when in fact the immovable parts, a lot of that should be the responsibility of the parents.
Yeah.
And I like what you say, parents of experience, by the way. I think that phrase,
Yeah.
using that phrase. So the parents of experience are the ones with the responsibility to be movable and to learn and grow.
Yeah, Sally, it's so true, and there aren't many systems in place for that growth to occur. It happened for me, some great, not the reason that wasn't great, but I think the simulation and the way in which we had to move as a society during COVID brought two very important things into sharp focus for, I think, a layer of adoption more broadly, and then differences of race an identity in adoption. And the first is this idea of ambiguous loss and grief. It was very clear to folks at that time, clearer than it's ever been in my existence, that there could be someone you very much care about, they could be very much alive, and you're separated from them and it made you sad. Until that point, it was almost impossible for anyone to understand this ambiguous loss, this like, how could you care and love this person when they really didn't exist for you in the first place, or whatever the language we would come up with. But that moment when it was so dysregulating, so confusing and chaotic for people to say, oh, grandma's there, but we can't get to her. It was like this thing that was so, it was so traumatizing for people. And I thought, oh, hold on a second. Wait, you know how you feel, mom, dad, caregiver, parent, grown up, about this human that has been removed and very swiftly removed from your, your community, your ability to see them and how it makes you feel? Well, that's a fraction. That might be a fraction of how a child entrusted to you might feel, where there's this person that was once part of them. You think of foster youth as well, who are with folks longer and more cognitively in their age in stage. And then you think of, adoption that may be earlier in life. But it was a great moment for me to say, this is the weight. Feel that weight. How does it feel? Name it. Tell me how you feel. And it's like someone sitting on my chest and I can't figure out how to get out of this anxiety. Well, that's something you need to explore with the child that is entrusted to you through adoption. And if you're not talking about family of origin, what did you do to keep the spirit of your relative alive when they weren't with you? And well, you maybe sent notes, you got on Zoom, you called more, you talked about them more, you brought them into the space, even though they weren't physically there, you brought their energy in. We can do the same thing with family of origin. We can do that, even if there are the most, complicated of circumstances. Human beings have abilities and have things that are human about them. Like they can make really good spaghetti, or they play basketball, or they have a great sense of smell. Who knows? But it's not all these things that may make a human, not able to care or look after someone. There are other things about them, physical and non-physical characteristics that come in. So I think it's layered, but we can fill in the blind spots, but we have to have some really clever tools in order to really bring them to life. So that's one piece. I'll pause there. Do you want to talk a little bit more about that one? Did something come up for either one of you that you want to kind of explore? Because I have another one that's a little bit different, but so I thought I'd give some space to you both to respond if you thought you'd like
Well, as
to.
you were talking about, the trauma and everything that we hold as adoptees, I was same race adoption, so I didn't have the complexity of, having someone from another race raise me, but the environment I was raised in lacked diversity, so I still had that, sense of not belonging in home or out of home. I didn't belong to either one of those environments. And so that really caused some adverse childhood experiences. Not only did I have the trauma in the beginning from being detached from my birth mother, but then the other elements that were happening around me that really placed me in a numbing state.
Mm.
I was numb to everything. I really didn't allow myself to feel, and so, that's, I think, what put a ceiling on the idea of there was anybody outside. There was no space for ambiguous loss. There was no space for, understanding the rationale that might be related to someone who you'd never seen or known. It was just the environment I was in, and I had very little bandwidth or whatever to experience what I was in. I was just going through the motion of trying to develop and grow and feeling safe enough to, be able to process and do the things I needed to do to become a young person or whatever. Childhood was different for me. you know, that's, as you were talking about that, that's what I was thinking about.
Yeah. And Sharon, I have to hold space with you a little bit because I want to tell little Sharon and little April that like that's we were supposed to just be growing and learning and doing things. Those added layers of complexity were above our pay grade at that time. We weren't meant to be able to know how to process any of that. Like, you know, it wasn't like we weren't letting ourselves do it. We didn't know how, and no one was helping us.
Right.
So it's a little bit of a different framing. I don't know if people listening would appreciate that. I appreciate saying out loud for myself because there's often so much that I put on. Well, I didn't do this and I wasn't able to do that. And at the end of the day, it's like I realize very clearly now that had nothing to do with my developing brain not being able to do things. It had everything to do with people around me not seeing, not having clarity around the things that needed to happen in order to just allow me to develop in the in the in the process of just being a kid and a human. But on top of all that, you know, there was so much more that needed to happen. And at the same time, I have to say this out loud too, which is, you know, there were so many things that were happening around me that were also just part of my parents' operating system, nature, like
Right.
wholesomeness, really important, healthy food, activity, work, labor. We had a small farm. We were outside working every day. My feet were in the dirt and I had animals around. So it was like, while they had blind spots here,
Yeah.
they had all these other richnesses, you know, of things that they didn't even know that they were doing.
Mhm.
Um, but that did work to counter some of that
Mhm.
because I think it would have been a very dark without some of those added things. And they were in some ways unintentional. They weren't like, you know, my parents said this is the healthiest way to do this and that. They did what their parents did in a way they kind of were passing that on in, and that part really worked.
Mhm. Yeah, I resonate because I was on a farm too. I was picking things and being in mud and, you know, watching chickens and bunnies and
Yes.
all this kind of stuff around me. So it helped my senses, you know, to grow and develop. So I honor you. I think that that is a similarity that we both share.
Yeah.
So yeah.
It's a game changer.
Yes, it is. It is. But you know, I was just thinking of, you know, the blind spot that my environment created in terms of curiosity about where I came from. I mean, there was none of that. I didn't have space for that. I just only had space for what I was in and what I was experiencing in that moment.
Yeah. And why is that, right? I mean, it was uncomfortable. It was completely uncomfortable um to talk about or to even bring into the energy of the space something that was meant to be forgotten and something that the professionals in adoption said, you know, keep it moving. Just don't have to worry about that. Not the differences of race, not adoption, none of it. So it was a conditioning that my parents sort of fell into and said, okay, this is all we have to do is this. And it ended up working out fairly well. But I think there's a lot of reasons why. And that's why I can talk about the things that I think were the most difficult and how to not have them be repeated in modern day.
Yes.
Mhm. Very powerful. Wow. Yeah, I'm curious about the other blind spot.
Oh, the other one is really interesting because I remember I was coming where was I? I was coming off of I was sitting on the beach. I remember it was right early in the pandemic and it was in April, right? Everything's shut down in March. It was April. And I had a mom call me. I was just hanging out and someone I know, and they had just been from the market, from the grocery store. And this is a white mother who has adopted a Black child. And I said, how you doing? She said, oh my gosh. She's like, I am exhausted and I'm like not in a good place. I was like, tell me why. I just came home from the market and I had to move with such precision. I had to worry about everything. Everything feels like a thread, and everything is just, it's too much. It's so much to be in the world and have to move with that kind of precision all the time. And I thought, aha. So one, the pandemic in my brain, I was like, yeah, this is nothing. Like, have to stay a little bit away from someone, have to be careful about how I move. I was being careful about how I moved, what I said, how I behaved. Since I can remember, as a child, I was like minding my movements and moving with a lot of precision, not just about the places I went, you know, in school, at the store. I mean, I always knew I had to move differently than my siblings, um, just inherently. And, you know, even in conversation, I had to be very precise about how I said what I said. Did I ask too many questions about birth family? Did I, you know, and when I started to play this back to the mom, I said, you know, one thing I have to say, and I'm very sorry that this is the reason, and I want us all to stay safe and be okay, but imagine that your child comes home feeling that way every day as a Black boy in a majority white environment. He has to regulate and move differently, and it is exhausting. And she was like, oh my gosh. Like, it was a like a palpable, real thing that she could no longer put her blinders on around. She couldn't say, well, I just can't imagine. I don't know. I'm not Black. I don't know how that feels. And I can't, da, da, da. Well, we all knew how, especially white folks, how they had to move differently and how it made them feel. They didn't like it. A lot of white people I know did not like it. It made them tired. They had to take a nap when they came home from the store. I'm like, y'all need to get a little bit more you know, robust here, because you know, if I took a nap every time I was out in the world, which I would like to do, but I can't. So it was a very sharp, distinct moment of bringing people in with a lot of tenderness and kindness, given everything that was going on. And even when I play the story back now and I bring people back to that time, I try to do so with a lot of grace and care, because it was devastating for so many people. And it also gave us so much to think about in terms of what it feels to have to restrict our movements and to feel that everything is a threat to you and people see you as a threat to them. And without COVID, I don't think a lot of people would have really known what that felt like, living in white bodies.
Mhm. Wow. And I think that I would add, therefore, some comments are, well, we don't have that experience as a white-bodied person. Well, that, I'll just say it, police officer has always been nice. Those kinds of, like, our world view is the world view, or our world experience is the world's experience. And minimizing what our kids' experience is. And I think that there's a tendency to want to minimize it, to somehow not recognize the pain that is being caused. You know,
Yeah.
like, I don't want my kids to have that experience. And I also, there's guilt. I don't want them to have that experience, because then I will feel guilty because I have brought them into that experience on some
Or I
level.
just don't want my family to, I don't want this to be different. I
I
don't
don't
want
want
to
it.
be reminded that this isn't a
And,
child
and
of my own making.
sure. And so there's a complicated sort of like why, and why that might get swept under the rug almost, but at whose expense, you know?
Yeah, that's one of those FAFO, you know,
Mhm.
or SASO is, or MASO, mess around and MAFO, mess around and find out. You know, we now know, given the data and the statistics that are not hidden around the experiences of adopted persons and their lifelong journey of mental health in some cases, educational outcomes, um, there are just too many places that are statistically significant data is not hidden, that the willful sort of like ignorance, I guess, and the blind spots that are still continuing to be kind of condoned. Now we know, so it's getting harder and harder for, I think, professionals, caregivers, systems to be able to say, well, nothing to see here. We just, as if this was a child born to you. I mean, those days are really over. However, I think the human condition is the human condition, and it's hard for people it's hard work to do that. It's hard work to dig in and run towards the burning building. But I mean, what is being, that's what's required for the journey.
And now I have to change.
Yeah.
I have to change being comfortable. I have to change maybe, well, if I'm not in an environment, if I'm still in an all white environment, change. Not that that's the full solution, but there's this, yeah, a lot of work that I have to do, and the tendency is, and then when you were talking about taking a break and taking a nap, I think sometimes adoptive parents take a break from it, and then they put the blinders back on, and then it can last for quite a while, and then maybe take the blinders off for a little bit, but it's all around more like I have the option almost, I think, to be able to do that. Whereas my
Sure.
kids don't have the option to
Right.
one day just sort of say, I'm
Put
not
the
going to think
burden down
about
for a
that.
little while. I'm
Yeah,
not
right,
adopted today. Yeah.
right,
No.
right. So I think that's the part we know about it, and it's almost harder. I'm speaking as a white woman, almost harder to think about it now because, like you said, it's harder to ignore, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and there's a lot. I'll say this too. I mean, I'm just gonna speak for myself. I've moved through different stages around stuff like this too, like really a guilt feeling around it, feeling guilty about having adopted. I love my kids terribly, so I'm not saying that, but just what I've put them through, something they
Mhm.
have no control over that
Yeah.
I did. And so there can be guilt, and the guilt can be kind of a really can freeze, be frozen in one spot and want to just stay there and say I'm not gonna do anything or look at it, or so the guilt can almost be something that can be used as immobilizing when maybe it could be transformed into being mobilizing. And
Yeah, I
yeah.
think that's a really good point, because while we talk about hard things and we can do hard things and we think about the elevation of our humanness and how important it is and all the things, and it's high stakes. I think it's, we talk about the outcomes, we talk about what we know to be true about um, the journey of adoption, which is lifelong. There's also an element of, wow, how amazing it is when you elevate this idea of looking after someone with all that knowledge. And people often say, well, we have no family history, we don't know. And that's so true. It can be, and you can find out things, but there's also this like amazing ability to dig so much deeper and make all these discoveries, um, that make it like, oh, it's not just fun to do family DNA, it's urgent. It becomes urgent. And when you do it with intention, I don't know, it just there's I think there's richness in it, and there can be joy, and there can be this like radiant energy that helps everybody. So I mean, I know it's work. I know that there are a lot of parents who have like 10 toes down into, nothing to see here, and just don't want to do the work, and that's on them. I don't think it's okay, and that's not a judgment. I just think it's just, it baffles me if we know certain things and we can see the benefit of moving at a higher degree of engagement, then by all means, and to do that self-healing work, to look and reflect on your childhood, and to be able to say out loud some of the things needs that didn't get met, and how that you can shift that intergenerational reality. I mean, I think it's exciting. I don't like that adoption, it brings us to this place and that there is so much trauma, but I hope it's an opportunity to look after the children that need the most of our love and attention, and have our brains turned all the way on and have our eyes wide open.
Right.
And then when we do that, I think the effect on the broader world is probably something we'll never really fully understand and know, but I do think it will be pretty profound.
As you guys are talking about the blinders on and everything else, I was thinking, it gave me this image of someone who's finally taken off the blinders, but then they have rose-colored glasses. And they really, even though their blinders are off, they still see things from their own perspective and ignore or think it's all perfect and everything's wonderful for the children. And unfortunately, there's a reality that the child is living in, but they can't see it.
Yeah, I mean, when the rose-colored glasses become shattered is when, I've seen estrangement and children moving into their pre-adulthood, adulthood, and they finally go, oh, I don't have to go there anymore. I don't have to go back. I mean, I'll never forget a parent who was very, I mean, I think their eldest is like in middle school now, and then there's 3 little ones in the home. 2 are adopted. And I remember I remember asking her, why are you how did you get so committed to making relationships with family of origin? Because she is like next level, even when the state and the professionals are like, oh no, we don't know where dad is, or we're not sure. And you don't really have to do that. She's like, no, 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 I'm doing it. And their siblings, and she makes sure the siblings are engaged. I mean, it's really what's supposed to be happening. And I said, how did you come to know that this is how you want to move? She said, when it comes time for my kids to leave, I want them to want to come back. And I want to have done everything in my power to create wholeness for them. That's my job. And I want them to want to come back to me as an adult. And I thought, man, that's it. That's it. Because my theory too is the elevation of parenting and looking after children and youth today with this lens of what is most urgent for the families that need it most and children that need it most. When we do what's right and to the highest elevation for those children in support of those families, it closes that gap to where, you think about relinquishment, voluntary relinquishment, as we know the data for women, is family support is almost the first things that comes up. Lack of family support.
Right.
So if you tightened up those relationships, if you could shore up some of that, we'd my theory at least is we'd be working towards more family preservation. We'd be working towards more openness and less guilt and shame around unplanned pregnancies. We'd be, talking early and often about sex and sexuality and the realities of our bodies and what they can do and the beauty of them and the respect that we're owed, that we deserve to give to them. So I mean, I feel like if we did all that more, you would hopefully see over time, at least that's my strong wish, is that we have more families that stay intact by going deeper into building those transformational relationships early in life for children.
Totally agree. One of my things I've always thought is necessary in junior high school, I think all children should be taught how to parent. Because there's no book, there's no instruction, you have what your parents did with you and everything, but if they had that added sort of objective information about what it is and how it works and what the outcome could potentially be, I think there'd be fewer children that would be separated from their original families, because the parent would say, oh, I think I know what to do next, or I think I can manage this a little bit better. So with family
Sure.
preservation or CPS and all those other things that come about wouldn't necessarily happen.
Yeah, as much. I mean, I think so. And that's my hope is that's I think there'll always be instances where children need to be looked after by someone other than their parent that they're born to. I think that there'll just always be instances of that. I don't like it, but I think that's true. And I think the better we can, in the instances where that is true, and that we do the best that we can to make that transition smooth and to keep it centered on the truth and keep it centered on what the child needs. So, I remain hopeful,
Yeah.
even when we're looking at all the stuff in the world. I have to try to find some hope. This conversation makes me hopeful, y'all, and the work that you do makes me hopeful.
Yeah,
So
well, and we certainly agree about family preservation, because what parent would ever want their child to go through what a child goes through to not be parented by the people who birthed them, right? I mean, who would ever want that? Um, so yeah, I think that I would have hope too, just like you said, that by supporting, and isn't it interesting that the number one thing that can prevent that kind of parenting experience with parenting with the family of origin is family support? That seems something that's doable to work on,
Yeah.
right? Yeah. Well,
yeah.
we could talk a lot about different stuff. Do
Yes.
you want to say one more thing, April, before you say?
Uh, I just show my gratitude to you for the conversations you have, for the work that you do,
Yeah.
and
Well,
hope that
we
people
are.
will find my podcasts and my work.
Yeah.
I'm happy to.
So, yeah, we can put that in our comments on our podcast too. But is there anything that you're up to right now that you'd really like to highlight for us?
Well, something that I've been working on for many years, and it just came naturally because of the way that my identity is attached to names in the calendar, which is was born and named June, and then my name was changed to April, and I'm born in October. So born in June, raised in April. I've really come to utilize this universal structure of the calendar to help eliminate some of these blind spots and to help really bring into sharper focus the rhythms of our lives that are connected to uh, our relationship with ourselves and how that can grow even more deep so that we're in better relationship to other people. So we talk about our birthdays, the parents, talk about their birthdays, and some people really like them, some people really don't. Some people find all kinds of ways to have a new relationship to their birthday. We talk about people's names and their relationship to their names, which comes into sharp focus with adoption. There's so many things that dot the calendar, and obviously Mother's Day and Father's Day. So I help agencies and organizations and individuals really utilize the calendar to help bring about more of a sense of clear and present identity, which helps you in your relationships, which then helps you face and embrace differences at the highest level, so that that's not as complex as it might be had you not done some of that work.
Wow, what a great way to use something so common for everybody as that starting up point. Would they find that at April, let's see, dinwoodie.com or?
Yeah, at aprildinwoodie.com, you can book me, inquire about speaking engagements or coaching. But I've done a couple different things, like with the state of Connecticut, I did a year-long journey with their professionals. And so we did one month per month, for a few hours every month. It was for continuing education credits. So we deconstructed a month at a time. So I've done a couple of day seminars. I've done full day. I've done 20 minutes. I've done, hour keynotes, you name it. But the calendar is just rich with opportunity in helping people really understand. I mean, one of the things, just to give a quick example of is, and it's very simple, is having parents of experience, adoptive parents, foster parents, put family of origins birthdays on the calendar. Real simple. What if I don't know them, April? Well, you can find a day where you honor family of origin if you don't know birthdays, and you say, without them, there's no you. We want to honor them. We want to honor what we know about them through you. You're a great runner. Oh my gosh, you have a better sense of direction than anybody in this family. So you must have gotten that from your family of origin. Honor the things and the parts of the human that's right in front of you right now that surely has to have come from their family of origin, because there's a way in which to anchor and ground a young person. And those are just small ways that makes it feel not so otherworldly and, like some kind of a, just this magical person. We are magical people, but we are made of things that can be named.
Yeah. Sharon, did you have anything to add before we
I
close?
just think that was extremely powerful. I mean,
yeah.
I really enjoyed the idea, the concept of honoring the parents, and on a special day, to help give some light to that blind spot, maybe that's living inside the child, and not the curiosity and the unanswered questions, that they're carrying around with them. So I really like that concept.
Thank you. Well, thanks for
Oh.
having me. It's a joy.
April, thank you so much. And I want to thank all of you for listening to Adoption Matters. We are a podcast, once again, that talks about real people, sharing real stories, getting real about adoption. So if you'd like to have more information about April, we'll put that, underneath when we do the, post it, I guess. We'll put that underneath there. If you'd like to know more information about our company, Growing Intentional Families Together, you can go to giftfamilyservices.com. We've enjoyed being with you, April, and all of you for joining us today, and we look forward to next time, another episode of Adoption Matters. Thank you very much.